I'm a headliner. I'm a headliner.
Yo, what is going on, guys? Dr. Ethan Turner here with the Fantasy Headliners, and it is time, baby. Week 1, we are ready to give you all the weekly content that you can handle over at the Fantasy Headliners. Make sure that you're subscribed, because every single week this season, I'm going to be breaking down every single relevant injury for fantasy football for you guys. I want this to be a one-stop shop. One time a week, you come in, you hang out with the doc for a few minutes, and you know everything that you need to know about the players that are injured on your fantasy teams. But before we get into it, make sure you guys go check out the sponsor for this show, Fantrax. It is a one-stop shop for everything that you want fantasy sports. The thing I love about Fantrax and the app that they have is that there's no fluff in this app. It's all fantasy sports, and that's all they're focused on. They want to make the slickest fantasy app that you can play fantasy football, basketball, baseball, anything you want. You can do it at Fantrax. Appreciate them sponsoring this week's injury update show. And let's get into it. All the injuries that you need to know about for your fantasy teams. All right, guys, let's start it out here. We don't have a moment of silence this week. Nobody has been ruled out for the season. So let's get straight into the guys that have already been ruled out. Let's get into the quarterbacks. Really only one guy to talk about here, and that is Zach Wilson. Wilson had a meniscus tear and a bone bruise that did require surgery. The meniscus tear was pretty significant, but it does sound like they just went in and did a meniscectomy, which means that they went in and just cut off the tear, which does have a faster recovery time, but maybe some long-term effects down the road in his career and life. Coach Robert Saleh did come out and say that Wilson is going to be out until at least week 4. Joe Flacco finds himself starting football games in 2022. If you'd have told me that 2 years ago, I'd have said, no way, Joe Flacco still has a job. But here he is, and he gets a revenge game against his old team, the Ravens. I don't really expect really great things from him, but I think he will be serviceable enough for the offense to still run somewhat smoothly. Not the offense that I'm really targeting in week 1, but just know that guys like Elijah Moore, guys like Garrett Wilson, even Breece Hall and Michael Carter shouldn't take a huge step back with Joe Flacco kind of running the offense there in New York. Up next at the tight ends, we got George Kittle. This is probably the news that was the most surprising for me to start the week. He had a groin strain in practice on Monday, did not practice on Wednesday. Practice injuries are always kind of shrouded in mystery. We don't have a lot of details. Obviously, there's no video of what happened, so I can't really tell like how he responded right afterwards to give you guys an idea of how severe it might be. But we do know that Kittle is no stranger to these types of injuries and just has had not great injury luck for the last 2 years. It's sad to see him already dealing with something to start the season before we even get to week 1. I am moderately concerned that Kittle, if he doesn't practice this week at all, that he could be out week 1. We should have a better idea on his status specifically by Saturday's live show. So make sure that you tune in for an update from Jake and Kyle there. I'm sure that they'll be hitting me up for some more info on George Kittle, and they will relay it to you guys. Another tight end that we're looking at, kind of monitoring this week, Zach Ertz. Ertz is dealing with a calf strain that he's had all preseason. He is back practicing in a limited fashion, which is good to see. Not a great start option coming off basically no preseason work. He's probably going to be a little bit rusty just given the lack of practice time. I would say he's more touchdown dependent this week in terms of fantasy relevance. Tight end is such just a total dump. So we know that even if he only goes for like 50 yards and 4 catches, he's probably still a tight end 1. But just know that Zach Ertz is limited to start the year. Next up at wide receiver, we got a bunch of guys here to talk about. Michael Thomas dealing with a hamstring strain, did return to practice this week, which is a good sign. He missed a little bit of time in the preseason with that hamstring. Don't forget he missed all of last year with an ankle injury. So you know that Michael Thomas, it's just kind of hard to trust him at this point in fantasy, given his recent history, given that we have seen him not play through stuff before. I do think that even if he is likely to play, which I do think he will probably play in week 1, it's just hard to trust him unless you're just looking for some upside in the flex spot or as your wide receiver 3. Another guy dealing with some preseason injury, bad luck, is Drake London. He tweaked his knee in the preseason opener, really hasn't seen the practice field until this week. It does look like he is on track to play. Like Michael Thomas, I am a little bit worried that he is, starting for fantasy coming off of this type of injury where he didn't get any practice time, wasn't able to build up a ton of rapport with starter Marcus Mariota. I'm tempering expectations for Drake London this week. I think it's probably a quiet week for him. Maybe he does get a few catches. Really, we're just hoping to see him healthy and playing, and that will give us some hope for the rest of the season for the rookie. Deontay Johnson is dealing with a shoulder sprain. That actually happened late in the preseason last game for the Steelers. DJ was interviewed on Wednesday. Did not sound very confident about this shoulder. He said he tried to do everything that he could, basically what my arm would allow me to do. That is not what you want to hear from a starting wide receiver of Deontay Johnson's caliber. It sounds like the shoulder is definitely messing with him, messing with his ability to practice, to do the things he needs to do on the football field. I think he's still hurting. If I'm the Steelers, of course I'm not, but if I was, I would be smart and probably sit Deontay Johnson a week, kind of protect him from himself. In week 1, maybe see what we have in George Pickens. Is he an alpha? Is he a guy that we can trust week to week to step up into a role like Deontay Johnson's? Might be a good little tester to start the year off by seeing what George Pickens can do. Can he carry over that preseason hype that he got? I just don't think that Deontay Johnson is ready to play. And if he does, by chance, which I don't expect him to, but if he does, don't expect a full workload for Deontay Johnson this week. Next up, we got Jalen Waddle. He's been dealing with a quad strain. He sat nearly the entire preseason, didn't practice really at all with this injury. Finally, some clarity that it was a quad strain. We didn't really know what he was dealing with until this week. He did get limited practice reps on Wednesday. Really good sign for him. I know he was kind of testing it last week, so it's good to see him actually get some practice time in, get the ability to play with his team a little bit in practice before the game. We love to see that. I do expect him to play, and I think he will probably get enough targets to be startable as kind of a wide receiver 3 option. I am worried a little bit about the quad strain becoming an issue during the game and him maybe having to sit out in the second half. We'll see what happens, but as of right now, it does look like he is trending towards playing. Another guy here didn't practice on Wednesday. Reportedly, he got stepped on last week in practice, so we know he's probably dealing with some type of foot injury, but we don't have a lot of details about what's going on with Allen Lazard. We just know he's not practicing at all. If he got his foot stepped on, and that's really all that's going on here, it's probably a pain management issue. They're going to be treating him throughout the week. Not really a whole lot to go off of here. If he doesn't practice at all this week, I would expect him to sit, because typically when players don't practice at all, there is a high likelihood that they are not playing at all that week. But Allen Lazard, again, dealing with a foot injury, probably more of an issue with pain management. How much can he handle? Can he run off of that foot? I will hopefully have more info on this kind of as the week progresses. Last up for the wide receivers, we got Chris Godwin. He's coming off an ACL tear in December last year. He practiced in full on Wednesday, which on paper would sound like a really good thing. And it is a good thing that he is practicing, just a very short recovery time from an ACL tear. The problem is that I think this practice report is a little deceiving. All the reports I've seen is that he's still wearing a non-contact jersey at practice, even though they listed him at full. I just kind of question if he's truly at 100%. is the team expecting him to take hits for the first time in an actual NFL game? Are we not going to hit him in practice at all? I just worry about that. I don't think that would be a good idea. And I'm not totally convinced that even if he's practicing in full, that they are going to let him go in week 1. I just don't think that they're going to do that unless we start seeing him get hit later in the week in practice, or at least being open to being hit. He doesn't have to take a ton of hits, but I want to see him at least get out of that non-contact jersey before I trust him in week 1. If he is active, again, huge risk there, just knowing that he hasn't taken a lot of contact, hasn't really had true full practices. So Chris Godwin, kind of off my radar for week 1. Let's finish up here with the running backs. We got Chase Edmonds dealing with a groin strain. He was listed as limited in practice this week. He is still pacing to play right now. I think it was actually a bit surprising to him that he ended up on the injury report. He came out on Twitter and was basically making some memes about the fact that he showed up on there. Doesn't sound like he is dealing with anything too serious. I think he's going to be fine. Pretty high upside PPR play, especially this week with Waddle not at 100% yet. J.K. Dobbins is recovering from his ACL tear last season. Not really a whole lot positive coming from the Ravens yet. I think that they do expect him to play at some point to start the year in the first 4 weeks because they didn't put him on IR. The problem is that his quarterback actually came out in a presser on Wednesday and said that he's hoping that J.K. Dobbins will be back in a couple of weeks. And that's just not what I would say is a confident vote of confidence from your quarterback that he is looking like he's going to play. I don't think Dobbins is going to play. If he does, hard sit for me. I just don't see anything from practice videos, from the reports from camp, from his current coaches and quarterback all kind of being like, yeah, he really wants to play, but he doesn't look like he's ready yet. I don't see any reason why you should be trusting J.K. Dobbins to start this season. He is definitely a second half of the year guy for me. And I'll be honest, I didn't really draft him at all this season for fantasy. Miles Sanders has been limited for most of the preseason with a hamstring strain. He's practicing in full. Good sign for him. I do expect him to play this week. Who knows what's going to happen fantasy-wise with this backfield. I still think I probably don't want anything to do with any of the running backs here. But Miles Sanders is going to be healthy and playing if you are relying on him as a flex option. I think you can throw him in there and hope that he scores a touchdown in this game. Kenneth Walker for the Seahawks, dealing with hernia surgery. He's moving around a little bit in practice, but I haven't seen anything about him practicing in any kind of official capacity. The Seahawks play on Monday night, so I'm probably just sitting Walker regardless of what happens here. Rashad Penny could break hearts in week 1 if he blows up, and I think he's going to be in a spot where he's going to get a ton of work. He is healthy for now, and so expect Rashad Penny to get a lot of work in the run game with Kenneth Walker coming back from this hernia surgery. Last up for the running backs, not really a true injury, but Brian Robinson Jr. for the Commanders was shot in an attempted robbery a few weeks back. And, more details have come out on this. Obviously, it's not a true injury, so it's hard for me to really tell you exactly what's going to happen with this. Gunshot wounds are very dynamic. It just depends on where he got shot. We know he got shot somewhere near his knee and in his glute. He's ditched his crutches, which is a good sign. He is walking without crutches. There are some signs that, maybe he's going to be back sooner rather than later. So we are wishing Brian Robinson the best on his recovery from that, but just know that there's no real timetable for something like this. It really just depends on how much damage was done with the gunshot. So again, not a true injury, but I wanted to update everybody on that. And something new I'm doing this year is I kind of want to throw a few defensive injury nuggets in just to help fantasy analysts just kind of know what's going on the defensive side. I am not doing IDP updates. I'm sorry for all you IDP fans. It's just not something I'm really capable of doing in a short amount of time. So no updates for the entire defensive side of the ball. But I do want to mention that J.C. Jackson, the cornerback one for the Chargers, is out this week with an ankle injury. Davante Adams should have a huge matchup advantage every time he is playing out wide. Of course, Davante Adams is a must start in fantasy, but what this also does is gives a bump to Hunter Renfrow, who's now going to be lining up most likely with the cornerback 3 for the Chargers. So Hunter Renfrow definitely getting some week 1 buzz in DFS, and I think is a pretty solid wide receiver 3 start for anybody that wants to, because J.C. Jackson is out. So that is it, guys. All the injuries that you need to know about for your fantasy teams this week. I look forward to hearing about all those week 1 victories that you guys have. If I forgot somebody, make sure you leave a comment down below. I'm going to do my best to answer every single injury question that I get in this video. I don't care if there's 500 questions on there. I'm going to do my best to answer them all. That's all I got for you guys this week. Looking forward to a ton of fantasy success this season with the Fantasy Headliners. Make sure you leave a like on this video and subscribe for weekly injury content from the Doc. That's all I got. The Doc is out.